Hi, good evening, and welcome to another edition of, Resistance TV. One of the most high-profile ways in which the apartheid regime in South Africa was brought down was by banning South Africa from international sporting events. And this helped to demoralise the racists who were running the country at the time, and it contributed to raising the world's consciousness about the brutal apartheid system as well. And I think the time is long overdue now to subject Israel to the same restrictions as South Africa, particularly in view of the fact that the Zionist apartheid regime is considerably worse than anything that was imposed by South Africa at that time. And that's not just me saying that. I mean, that's the view of ANC veterans like Ronnie Casrils, and of course the late Archbishop Desmond Tutu made a similar point. So I'm delighted to welcome Kat Pijetlovic onto the show this evening to talk about a petition that's being sponsored by the Democracy in Europe movement that Yanis Varoufakis helped to found a few years ago. And the aim of it, obviously, is to persuade sporting bodies to exclude Israel in the way in which South Africa was excluded during its apartheid era. So welcome onto the show, Kat. How are you?
Thank you very much, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Great. Well, it's good to have you on the show, because this is really an important campaign, and going alongside South Africa's case against Israel at the International Court of Justice. Just set out really the terms of the petition, if you could, Kat, please.
The petition is basically calling on sports governing bodies to ban Israel from international sports, such as Olympics, FIFA World Cup, UEFA's Euro, FIFA basketball competition, and so on. So I have initiated this petition. I've co-organized it then with DM25, as you mentioned, because this is the organization I knew will not fall under the pressure of Zionist lobby when they inevitably ask for its removal from the website. Like if I went to change.org, it would be liable for censorship. And here it was safe. So there's a 12-page letter attached to the petition that explains the deeper reasoning as to why this is needed. And so we are hoping to get as many signatures as possible. At the moment, there is something over 36,000. We've just recently put it up and published it. So I would ask everyone who is watching this to go to the petition website, which you can find on dm25.org or on my Twitter profile, and sign it and share it widely. This will enable us to take the next steps, because collecting signatures, obviously, alone is not going to be enough.
Yeah, I mean, and it's in the description to tonight's show as well. But I mean, the pressure, I think, is beginning to mount, and I think there's been a little bit of success already, hasn't there, Kat, in relation to banning Israel? I think the hockey sporting body taken a step in that direction now.
That is true. The reason hockey cited was the safety and the inability to provide safety at events, which is one of the reasons also we mentioned in our letter. And I'm not sure how much a letter has influenced this decision and how much the hockey itself realized that there are issues. But the most important part is really to try and peacefully isolate the occupying apartheid regimes, put pressure, as you said, on the government. And I think in Israeli society, this might come as a shock in a way, which didn't happen in case of Russia. I think there is a psychological element to it, which is that Russia is used to being vilified, and in the Western media, and even every single Hollywood movie, the Russians are bad guys. But in Israeli society, this might cause a different reaction. Also, Israel is rather dependent, while Russia was quite self-sufficient, and there is that difference in why the sanctions might have not worked with Russia, and I'm pretty sure it would have a different effect in Israel.
No, indeed, I think that's very, very true, Kat. I mean, you talk about the double standards there. I mean, did you say a little bit about that, really? I mean, what do you make of these double standards? Because the way in which, like you point out, Russia was treated. I mean, indeed, the way in which South Africa all those years ago was singled out. I mean, I know they did. South Africa hang on to a lot of political support for far too long, but sporting bodies and another bodies, governmental bodies for that matter, didn't feel restrained in the end from taking action against South Africa. And yet here in Israel, we've got a system which, as I was saying in the introduction, is considerably worse than the appalling system that was in place for all those years in South Africa. I mean, what do you make of those double standards?
Well, obviously, there are some other actors and powerful political actors that are at play. There are powerful lobbies that do have a control of a kind over the sports governing bodies, and the difference in standards, and it's very apparent. It's not just South Africa and Russia. We've had over the years, there were other countries as well excluded for much, much less. And the reason you and I can both start guessing what it is, but as I said, there are things that are happening in the background which involve powerful political actors. In terms of their own regulatory standards, FIFA, UEFA, International Olympic Committee should all be applying them, if not looking at international law and saying we don't want to meddle into politics because we are politically neutral. Well, fine, but how come you weren't politically neutral in other matters? Which, if you look at it, if they want to be politically neutral, fine, but then apply your own standards from your own human rights policies. Because FIFA has human rights policy and they have their own statutes, and those statutes say something like that FIFA is committed to respecting all internationally recognized human rights, shall strive to protect those rights. And then they also prohibit discrimination of any kind between any groups of people and any countries. Discrimination here is obvious. We had, on the day that Russia invaded Ukraine, that very same day, just within hours, condemnations were issued by International Olympic Committee, by FIFA, UEFA, and 4 days later, so only 4 days into invasion, we had fully suspended Russia. They have fully suspended it. And now we have 3 months of something that we haven't seen in our lifetime, at least not broadcast in this manner, and we are doing nothing in sports. So yes, the questions have to be asked from these governing bodies why that is so. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I host another program called Palestine Declassified, and we look on a weekly basis at the way in which the Israeli regime tries to stifle solidarity with the illegally occupied people of Palestine. And you're absolutely right. I mean, the influence of the Zionist lobby is very widespread, and I'm sure they are, applying pressure to, prevent the action being taken. But look, people power can overcome that. But just talking about these double standards, we've also seen where that people power has manifested itself on the terraces of football grounds. Particularly, I'm thinking of Celtic Football Club, where the Green Brigade, on a regular basis, as thousands of people display banners supporting the Palestinian resistance, Palestinian flags, etc. And the UEFA, the European governing body of football, has fined Celtic as a result of their fans showing solidarity with Palestine, and much to the chagrin as well of the football club's directors, the actions I'm saying of these supporters, and indeed many of those supporters have been banned from the ground. This is quite shocking, isn't it? Really, where people, I can't imagine. If you sort of turn the clock back 30 or 40 years of people showing solidarity with the South African peoples that struggle against apartheid, that similar actions would have been taken. Do you agree with that?
Well, we can only guess, what would have happened, but the idea of stifling the voices that stand up for human rights is, yes, as you say, it's not possible to explain in any rational terms, except for, as you mentioned at the start, that there is a powerful lobby behind all of this. The lobby that at the start of the war has sent the requests basically to all the governing bodies, and not just governing bodies, but to all the sports organizations, including the one that I co-founded, where they asked us to support Israel publicly, to express support with Israeli victims. When I insisted that we include also Gazan victims in our expression of sympathy, that was rejected by my other co-founder of the organization. And, the statement that we issued on 12 October was pretty shocking to me. I have left the organization as a result. Yes, the Celtic fans were fantastic, to go back to that. And they are not the only ones. There are other football clubs in Europe, such as Bohemia in Ireland as well, who are flying the Palestinian flag on their stadium. So the solidarity is there among people, but I don't see it reflected in the official policies of either governments or sports governing bodies.
Yeah. Do you anticipate, Kat, any, if you like, sporting celebrity endorsements of the petition? I mean, we've seen Gary Lineker being targeted because I think he shared a tweet calling for action against Israel, and he's now being piled on. I mean, there's been a manufactured pile on by the Zionist lobby. I think, they'd like to see him sacked, for expressing, a fairly modest sort of level of support for human rights and the struggle of the Palestinian people. But I mean, have there been any celebrity supporting personalities that have got behind it? And do you anticipate any of them doing so? And are you applying any pressure or requesting key sporting figures to express their solidarity and support for the petition that you've launched here?
I think I would not approach the active football players in either case, because they are definitely going to suffer consequences, as you already saw in a couple of cases with one footballer plays in Germany, in Mainz was it, and the other one is from France. Both of them expressed support and they got into trouble. So I think active football players are out of my radar, so to speak. Maybe we could expect something from former football players that don't have some major role in, say, as commentators of football, or that haven't really had that second career after that, because every career these days where you're going to criticize and legitimately criticize Israeli government actions is going to get you in trouble of some kind. You're going to be subject to censorship, and nobody wants to go through that. So I also have a rather optimistic view of things at the end, which I think that this will all end one day, and the history will show that these people were actually right, and that the entire witch hunt on them by the Zionist lobby that is rather strong in Europe, which I didn't know even existed until all of this started. I think history will show who is who, and that is the only kind of ray of light in this situation where everybody seems to be censored. You're not allowed to say anything. People are calling your work and asking the university you work for to fire you for standing up for human rights. That is insane, and we have seen that in history, and we know when.
No, absolutely. Well, I mean, the weaponization of anti-Semitism is quite shocking and scandalous. And as you say, people have lost their employment as a result of being targeted, merely for expressing solidarity with Palestine and for criticizing Zionism, which at the end of the day is a racist, settler, colonial ideology. And we're seeing it manifesting itself in the form of a genocide in Gaza before our very eyes. It's just happening on a daily basis on our smartphones, on our PCs, and on our television screens. And it's quite astonishing, really, that people are running scared of actually speaking out. I mean, this, to me, I think is pretty much unprecedented. I think even in the times when the South African regime enjoyed the political support of the US administration, the UK governments also were supporting them. Indeed, Margaret Thatcher described Nelson Mandela as a terrorist, and many young conservatives would walk around sporting badges saying "Hang Mandela," and they had T-shirts with similarly grotesque slogans emblazoned across them. But obviously time has moved on, and people in those days who spoke out in spite of the government support for the Israeli regime weren't sanctioned in the way in which people are now for speaking up in support of Palestine. But I mean, just tell me, I mean, this is a pan-European campaign, isn't it? Pan-European petition. How's it going across Europe? I mean, you mentioned the number of signatures. I mean, how is the campaign manifesting itself here in Britain, but also over the English Channel in the continent of Europe as well?
We have just started. We have posted petition at quite an inconvenient date. It was on 30th December that we published it, which is when everybody is on vacation. So we couldn't really start properly advertising it until 8th January, when we had our first meeting as to how to go about it. It is not a pan-European campaign. It is definitely a global campaign. We are getting the letter translation translated into Arabic currently, and into French, and Spanish and English translations are already available on the site. So this is something that will go global. 2 days ago, I was also on Al Jazeera, which is meant to reach the Arab-speaking world.
Yes, of course.
So the petition will definitely take place outside of Europe. I don't have any statistics as to how many people are signing from which country. We don't have names displayed. This is something that I think only IT guys have access to. We are expecting within a certain amount of time to gather number of signature that will enable us to take this next step. As I said, gathering signature alone is not enough. We need to include a couple of governments at least, because governments who have signed and ratified the International Convention on the Prohibition of Apartheid in Sport have obligation under international law to prohibit their own sportsmen and sportswomen and their own teams from competing with countries that practice apartheid. I have not seen any country that has done this. I think this is because the document is a bit obscure. It is not as famous as, I don't know, the Rome Statutes or the Genocide Convention. So we would need a couple of governments to perhaps do that. One thing that could help petition massively, in my opinion, would be if the ICJ would rule that at least provisional measures would indicate that there is a genocide ongoing, in which case I don't see how could governing bodies in sports get away with keeping a country that is practicing genocide. It would be the same like keeping a Nazi Germany right now.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. I mean, is there any way in which ordinary grassroots activists can help to garner signatures and promote the petition, Kat?
Yeah, definitely. Well, as I said, share it as far and as wide as possible. That is one way. Sign it, inform people. Usually know somebody who has large social following, who is aligned with the idea. And if many people with large social following would post this petition, it would go viral, which is what we are hoping. And all that we need is a few, so to speak, celebrities, somebody that has millions and millions of followers to post it on their social media, and I think it would take a life of its own. But again, number of signature, Chris, I don't think it is crucial here. What is crucial, and there are a couple of other petitions going on alongside. on the same topic. So it is important to have that activism. It is important that once that we decide to approach IOC, FIFA, UEFA, FIBA, and others, that we have solid amount of signatures to say, here's what people are supporting, that we have hundreds of international organizations representing millions of people that also sign, which is something that BDS movement is working on right now. And once we approach it, to say this is a global wish of people. And here is also a few other things, which is that we have completely the same situation. It mimics the one from when the Russia invaded Ukraine. You have then taken a decision to ban Russia quite quickly. What is the difference now? Why are you doing nothing now when the figures alone and statistics alone are staggeringly different? Within just 3 months, we have over 30,000 civilians killed, of which 13,000 are children. I'm counting those under the rubble as well, presumed dead. And in the entire 2-year war with between Russia and Ukraine, we have over 500 children died, which is over 500 children. Too much and too many, of course, but still 13,000 in 3 months is, and in a population of 2.2 million as opposed to 44 million population in Ukraine, it is still starkly different, but the approach is still much milder. So the questions seriously must be asked, I think, by media. Media can play a huge role in putting pressure on the sports governing bodies, into raising awareness, into promoting this petition and the others like it, to create the pressure where governing bodies have to answer, have to come up with why. And we are all interested to hear their explanation. I don't see anything that they can say that is convincing. And just the question, why? Why is that different from the situation?
Well, I mean, I think the alternative media, the independent media, small platforms like ours and bigger platforms, obviously like Al Jazeera that you've been on, which has a huge reach, but there are many, many other independent media outlets now that we need to try and get this message out, it seems to me, on. I mean, the difficulty, of course, with the corporate media is that they are very much influenced by the Zionist lobby. We've had experience of that in this country, in the UK, where, for example, the Jeremy Corbyn project, when he was leading the Labour Party, was subjected to an appalling smear campaign. Many people were casualties of that campaign. Ultimately, it was destroyed, and the main reason was because of his support for the Palestinian people and criticism of the Israeli regime, and that was unconscionable to them. But I mean, I know that Yanis Varoufakis, obviously with his involvement with DM and so on, has thrown his weight behind it. I mean, Yanis is a big figure, isn't he? I mean, I'm sure that will be a big boost, won't it? Because he's got his own big following, but also I think he's quite influential on other players, isn't he? To potentially give support for the petition. And I'm thinking of people like Roger Waters, could play a role in supporting the petition as well and raising awareness about it.
Yes, as soon as you put me in touch with Roger Waters, I'll definitely ask him to do this. I have approached people, but it is different if, for instance, we are guests on the same show, and then I contact them and say, hey, we were on this show together, and could you please retweet? That works. But if some complete stranger approaches them, those emails are usually ignored. So there is an uphill battle here for, and as far as Yanis, of course, I said that we've just started this. So he hasn't had a time in particular, because on 11th and 12th, there was something much more important going on, which is the case in ICJ was being presented by both South Africa and Israel. Everybody were in The Hague, and that was the focus. So once we get into properly marketing this, so to speak, and I think the reach is going to be far and wide. And I would like definitely some celebrities to post this on their social media, those that have already spoken out and without regard to what happens to their contracts and to their sponsorships. And so, that would be extremely useful, not just for the petition, for the wider cause, for raising awareness. And I think people have woken up in either case. with everything that's been going on for the last 3 months. I think a lot of people have changed their opinions and opened their eyes, so to speak.
I mean, I hope, Kat, that the outpouring of support and solidarity across the world. I mean, it's unprecedented. We've never seen anything like this. Hundreds of thousands of people turning out on the street in virtually every country around the world, even in nations that have actually banned demonstrations in support of Palestine, have still been, turning out. So hopefully that will, have an influence on some of these celebrities and give them the confidence to speak out. But of course, and again, this is something that we've covered on Palestine Declassified, and talking about the influence and the reach of the Zionist lobby in the entertainment industry. Very powerful. And indeed, young and up and coming artists who have expressed support, solidarity with Palestine have seen their careers stifled, and some actually destroyed altogether. And one of the higher profile artists, people like Low Key, there's been a huge campaign against him, and he's fearless. He speaks out all the time. But there's been attempts to get him kicked off Spotify, to demonetize his output on YouTube. And indeed, they've had some success in that. Actually, they're not completely banned him off YouTube, but they've had some success with some of his tracks that he's recorded, which had millions of views, have been kicked off YouTube. So it is it is a big thing, but hopefully, if people, it's sufficient people. Well, I mean, I don't know how much bigger it could get, but we've seen millions of people turning out. Hopefully that will, have an effect. I think it will certainly have an effect, won't it, on the politicians, because around the world this year we've got a huge number of elections taking place, and I would like to think, I don't know what your thoughts are, Kat, that this level of support that we're seeing manifesting itself on the streets will actually concentrate the minds of some of these politicians. Because here in the UK, for example, and I know it's a similar situation in other countries where there's a massive disconnect at the moment between the political class and the general public. But here in Britain, the two main parties, the Labour Party and the Conservative Party, which is in government at the moment, are as one when it comes to the issue of Israel and Palestine. And that means that, they're supporting Israel, they're opposing a ceasefire, and their criticism, when it comes, is always directed at Palestine and at the resistance there. So I don't know if and again, I think this petition, hopefully it will gather momentum. That will also help to put pressure, not just on the sporting bodies, but also help to concentrate the minds of some of these politicians. And maybe many of them, I'm hoping many, I'd like to see all of them, will be replaced. And if not replaced, at least maybe modify their positions. I don't know whether you agree with that, Kat. What's your thoughts about how this might play out with the political class?
I am not sure, Chris, because I all that I see is that people are, as you said, there is a disconnect between people and the governments. All that I see is that people are ignored completely. Their wishes are ignored. And of course, you mentioned the elections coming up, and that might play a role in how the politicians respond. But I don't see it happening because for the exact same reason that you mentioned. Two parties which are supposed to be political opponents are like one, and it's not just in the UK. I see it also in the United States. We have Republicans and Democrats, all of them strongly and unconditionally supporting Israel. So, who are people going to vote for? They don't have a choice, and it doesn't seem that any of these political presidential candidates, at least in the US, are willing to change their position on Israel at all.
No,
so it's.
I think the situation in the United States, is more problematic, is more difficult. Although I do know that there is huge support in the United States for Palestine and revulsion at what Israel is doing, and that is growing. There's no doubt about that. I mean, even in the Democrat Party, there are some voices are beginning to. I'm talking about the grassroots now. Speak out. And there's hope maybe that certainly at the kind of not necessarily the presidential level, but at the Senate and the House of Representatives, and that there may be a change brought about there. Here in the UK, of course, we've got some smaller parties. There's attempts to bring about a kind of coalition of progressive left-wing groups and parties and independents, to mount some sort of meaningful challenge at the election, and we hope that we'll get some voices elected there at the election, because really, I mean, I share your pessimism, frankly, about changing the mindset of the in Britain anyway of the two mainstream political parties. But there's always a hope that a breakthrough could occur, and you get a new cohort of politicians who are prepared to speak out. And the situation, of course, in the United States, I mean, the politicians there are very aware of the power of the of AIPAC, the Israel lobby group, and the Anti-Defamation League, and so on, who actually put a lot of money into politics and so on. And when people speak out, I mean, they try and ensure that they are primaried out. They put up a candidate, put lots of money behind them to push them out, because money speaks in the United States, as it does in the United Kingdom, but perhaps to a lesser extent. But we mustn't give up, and I'm hopeful that we will see these new voices breaking through, and definitely that the support is there from the wider general public, it seems to me. But just finally, Kat, because we've been going for over half an hour now, this is really an interesting and important topic. Just tell us about the sort of timescale that you're looking at in relation to presenting this petition. I mean, have you got a sort of end date in mind, or is it just dependent on how the campaign goes?
The date is as soon as possible.
Right.
Yesterday, because every day is crucial. Every day it takes away about 250 lives.
Exactly.
So as soon as we create conditions, a few conditions that you're looking for, we will approach the governing bodies. When that will happen, I'm not quite sure, but it cannot happen soon enough. And for everything that you've mentioned before, concerning the elections, the politics, and the new party, somebody breaking through, I do think that this is a point in history where nothing short of some sort of global revolution will do. That the system is already too entrenched in certain ways that nothing can really uproot it other than people rising up in many different ways. Through protests, demonstrations, petitioning, that is definitely one thing. Perhaps workers' unions can be extremely useful in this case as well. And, sports governing bodies can be extremely useful to protection of human rights. And that is why it is a pity that they are not implementing their own human rights commitments from their own statutes, that FIFA and UEFA have, for instance, allowed Israeli settlement clubs to host matches of Israeli leagues, which, according to their own rules, should have already resulted in kicking out Israel just for that reason alone, for the breach of regulatory rules they have. And I know that 66 European parliamentarians have sent a petition to FIFA and UEFA already about it in 2016, and it just fell on deaf ears. I know that the BDS movement has also been petitioning, and the hundreds of organizations representing millions of people have signed, and still nothing's changed. I know that Sepp Blatter has spoken to one of the ministers in Israel at the time, about it, about free movement of Palestinian players, because Palestinian player in Gaza cannot move to West Bank whenever they want. If they need to play matches, cup matches, for instance, the visas are routinely denied. Half of the team cannot go for unspecified reasons, or they let the entire team go, but they don't let all the goalkeepers. All three goalkeepers cannot go. So people cannot have free movement, and they cannot have a license for sports infrastructures in West Bank. 98% are routinely rejected. So Blatter has tried to address the issue of settlement clubs and all of these other practical issues the sport, in particular football in Palestine, is facing, and to no avail. So how long is this going to go on? How long this impunity and doing whatever they want without any consequences is going to go on? And when is the sport going to decide we can do something about it? And it's in our own regulation. All that we need to do is fulfill our own obligations under our own statutes.
Yes, no, indeed, absolutely. Well, all power to your elbow. I mean, it may seem a big hurdle that you're trying to overcome, but as Nelson Mandela once said, it always seems impossible until it's done. And I feel that we are reaching a point where, given the level of support that we're seeing for Palestine around the country, the way in which consciousness has been already raised around the world, I feel sure that will have an effect. This could be a pivotal year, and this petition could be a crucial part of making this a turning point this year. So thanks again for coming on the show this evening, Kat. We really appreciate that. And if our viewers haven't already signed this petition, please make sure you do, and please do everything you can to promote it and share it, and get as many people as to sign it as well, because the stakes couldn't be higher. So thanks again, Kat. Thank you everybody for watching. All being well, we hope to be back on Resistance TV next week at the same time. So until then, this is Chris Williamson saying bye for now.